Water! Water! Give me holy water! But the next moment her fears were gone, and they came no more to torture her. She heard the flames crackling below her, and immediately distress for a fellow creature who was in danger took possession of her. It was the friar Isambard. She had given him her cross and begged him to raise it toward her face and let her eyes rest in hope and consolation upon it till she was entered into the peace of God. She made him go out from the danger of the fire. Then she was satisfied and said, "Now keep it always in my sight until the end." Not even yet could Cauchon, the man without shame, endure to let her die in peace, but went toward her, all black with crimes and sins as he was, and cried out, "I am come, Joan, to exhort you for the last time to repent and seek the pardon of God." "I die through you," she said, and these were the last words she spoke to any upon earth. "I die through you, Cauchon. I die through you. I die through you." Then the pitchy smoke shot through with red flashes of flame, rolled up in a thick volume, and hid her from sight. And from the heart of this darkness her voice rose strong and eloquent in prayer. And when by moments the wind shredded somewhat of the smoke aside, there were veiled glimpses of an upturned face and moving lips. At last a mercifully swift tide of flames burst upward, and none saw that face any more, nor that form, and the voice was still. Yes, she was gone from us, Joan of Arc. What little words they are, to tell of a rich world made empty and poor. Conclusion. Joan's brother Jacques died in Domremy during the great trial at Rouen. This was according to the prophecy which Joan made that day in the pastures. At times she said the rest of us would go to the great wars. When her poor old father heard of the martyrdom, it broke his heart, and he died. The mother was granted a pension by the city of Orleans, and upon this she lived out her days, which were many. 24 years after her illustrious child's death, she traveled all the way to Paris in the winter time, and was present at the opening of the discussion in the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which was the first step in the rehabilitation. Paris was crowded with people from all about France, which came to get the sight of the venerable dame, and it was a touching spectacle when she moved through these reverent, wet-eyed multitudes on her way to the grand honors awaiting her at the cathedral. With her were Jean and Pierre, and no longer the light-hearted youths which marched with us from Vaucouleurs, but war-worn veterans with hair beginning to show frost. After the martyrdom, Noel and I went back to Domremy, but presently, when the Constable of Richemont superseded Le Tournois as the king's chief adviser and began the completion of Joan's great work, we put on our harness and returned to the field and fought for the king all through the wars and skirmishes until France was freed of the English. It was what Joan would have desired of us, and dead or alive, her desire was law for us. All the survivors of the personal staff were faithful to her memory and fought for the king to the end. Mainly, we were well scattered, but when Paris fell, we happened to be together. It was a great day and a joyous, but it was a sad one at the same time, because Joan was not there to march into the captured capital with us. Noel and I remained always together, and I was by his side when death claimed him. It was in the last great battle of the war. In that battle fell also Joan's sturdy old enemy, Talbot. He was 85 years old and had spent his whole life in battle. Wow. A fine old lion he was, with his flowing white mane and his tameless spirit, yes, and his indestructible energy as well, for he fought as knightly and vigorous a fight that day as the best man there. La Hire survived the martyrdom 13 years, and always fighting, of course, and for that was all he enjoyed in life. I did not see him in all that time, for we were far apart, but one was always hearing of him. The bastard of Orleans, and d'Alençon and d'Orléans lived to see France free, and stood by with Jean and Pierre Jacques and Pasquerel, and I alone, and me at the rehabilitation. But they are all at rest now, these many years. I alone am left of those who fought at the side of Joan of Arc in the great wars. She said I would live until these wars were forgotten, a prophecy which failed. If I should live 1,000 years, it would still fail, for whatsoever had touched with Joan of Arc, the thing is immortal. Members of Joan's family married, and they have left descendants. Their descendants are of the nobility, but their family name and blood bring them honor which no other nobles received or may hope for. You have seen how everybody along the way uncovered when those children came yesterday to pay their duty to me. It was not because they are noble, it is because they are grandchildren of the brothers of Joan of Arc. Now, as the rehabilitation, Joan crowned the king of reigns. For reward, he allowed her to be hunted to her death without making one effort to save her. Her reward was to be hunted to her death without making any effort to save her. During the next 23 years, he remained indifferent to her memory, indifferent to the fact that her good name was under a damning blot, put there by the priest because of the deeds which he had done in saving him and his scepter, indifferent to the fact that France was ashamed and longed to have the deliverer's fair fame restored. Indifferent all that time. Then he suddenly changed and was anxious to have justice for poor Joan himself. Why? Had he become grateful at last? Had remorse attacked his hard heart? No, he had a better reason, a better one for this sort of man. This better reason was that now that the English had been finally expelled from the country, they were beginning to call attention to the fact that this king had gotten his crown by the hand of a person proven by the priest to have been in league with Satan and burnt for it by them as a sorceress. They were beginning to call attention to the fact that this king had gotten his crown by the hands of a person proven by the priests to have been in league with Satan and burned for it by them as a sorceress. Therefore, of what value or authority was such a kingship as that? Of no value at all. No nation could afford to allow such a king to remain on the throne. It was high time to stir now, and the king did it. That is Charles the Seventh, came to be smitten with anxiety to have justice done for the memory of his benefactress. He appealed to the Pope, and the Pope appointed a great commission of churchmen to examine into the facts of Joan's life and award judgment. The commission sat at Paris, at Domremy, at Rouen, at Orleans, at several other places, and continued its work during several months. It examined the records of Joan's trial. It examined the Bastard of Orleans and the Duke d'Alençon and d'Aulon and Pasquerel and Corcelles and Isabelle de la Pierre and Manchon and me and many others whose names I have made familiar to you. Also, they examined more than 100 witnesses whose names are less familiar to you, friends of Joan in Domremy, Vaucouleurs, Orleans, and other places, and a number of judges and other people who had assisted at the Rouen trials, the abjuration, and the martyrdom. And out of this exhaustive examination, Joan's character and history came spotless and perfect, and this verdict was placed upon record to remain forever. I was present upon most of these occasions, and saw again many faces which I have not seen for a quarter of a century. Among them some well-beloved faces, those of our generals, and that of Catherine Boucher, married, alas, and also among them certain other faces that filled me with bitterness, those of Beaupere and Corcelles and a number of their fellow fiends. I saw Humet and little Minguette, edging along toward 50 now, and mother of many children. I saw Noel's father and the parents of the Paladin and the Sunflower. It was beautiful to hear the Duke d'Alençon praise Joan's splendid capacities as a general, and to hear the bastard endorse these praises with his eloquent tongue, and then go on and tell how sweet and good Joan was, and how full of pluck and fire and impetuosity and mischief and mirthfulness and tenderness and compassion and everything that was pure and fine and noble and lovely. He made her live again before me and wrung my heart. I have finished my story of Joan of Arc, that wonderful child, that sublime personality, that spirit which in one regard has had no peer and will have none. This, its purity from all alloy of self-seeking and self-interest, personal ambition. In it no trace of these motives can be found, search as you may, and this cannot be said of any other person whose name appears in profane history. With Joan of Arc, love of country was more than a sentiment, it was a passion. She was the genius of patriotism. She was patriotism embodied, concreted, made flesh, and palpable to the touch and visible to the eye. Love, mercy, charity, fortitude, war, peace, poetry, music. These may be symbolized as any shall prefer, by figures of either sex or of any age. But a slender girl in her first young bloom, with the martyr's crown upon her head, and in her hand the sword that severed her country's bonds, shall not this, and no other, stand for patriotism through all the ages until time shall end.